Yeah, almost everyone. They will keep on joining. We'll assigning the room later.
Okay, okay. My screen is visible to all of you? No.
No, sir, you have not shared the screen.
Okay. So before we come to the main discussion, let us first just brief about the how the hormones are being tested. As we all know, hormones they circulate at a very minimal low level. So even slight difference will distinguish disease from the health. So we have to be very careful while interpreting all these hormones. Number one. Number two, to reach that much of sensitivity and specificity, we need a specific assays. So two most commonly used assay for hormonal interpretation is either antibody-based immunoassay, which is mainly either fluoroimmunoassay or chemoimmunoassay, and second is the TMS chromatography, which is very sensitive. Apart from these two methods, if you are having reports which has been done by ELISA or some other methods, then it may not be that accurate. So you need to interpret in that reference, in that respect. So always ask for that these hormones should be done by the appropriate assays. Apart from that, when we are advising hormones, we should be knowing how this has to be done, especially the timing. For example, if you just want to go for TSH, prolactin or IGF-1, they must be in fasting state. Although in fasting state, difference may be 5 to 10%, but it is there. This is number one. Number two, timing of the day. For example, we are advising cortisol or ACTH. For cortisol, it has to be either 8 a.m. or 4 p.m. rather than at any time of the day. And if it is ACTH, it should be the morning sample only. Apart from that, if you are advising GH, gonadotropins or growth hormone, gonadotropins mainly LH or FSH, the random measurements is not that valuable as the stimulating results. So for estimating both these hormones, you have to stimulate the pituitary. After that, we take sample after say 30, 60, 90 or 120 minutes as per the protocol. And based of that result, only we say what is the problem or patient is healthy or diseased. So choosing a specific laboratory method. Units is very, very important. Many a times you may have thyroid in picomole, but I remember microgram per deciliter. So unit has to be seen very carefully. And if you are not aware what is the conversion factor for particular unit, this is a website which is freely available, as we all have a smartphone nowadays. So www.endmemo.com. You can go to that website, put it the hormone, either it is ACTH, cortisol, whatever is there, and you can see what is the conversion factor and what is the value. There are two hormones which are temperature sensitive, so we have to be very careful when ordering these hormones, especially PTH and ACTH. Many a times we just collect the sample. For example, patient is admitted in ward and you are sending the sample without any ice pack. So these are pretty heat labile hormones. They may degrade during the transport and while the processing. So you will be having falsely low value. So always, whenever you are sending PTH, parathyroid hormone or ACTH, always give them in an ice pack, never as a routine sampling. So with this background about the hormones, let us first discuss the growth hormone, which is, quite frequently advised. So assessment of growth hormone is very difficult. Reason being, the secretion is a pulsatile. Say every 90 minute or 100 minute, there is a pulse of GH, and while you are doing estimation of growth hormone, that times maybe pituitary may not be giving that pulse. So that is why random assessment is of no use. And between these pulses, the level of GH may be as low as just 0.1 nanogram per ml. So unit is nanogram per ml and it may be as low as 0.1. So patient may be GH sufficient. If we are doing randomly, we falsely may label this patient as a GH deficiency. So what to do to make a growth hormone deficiency? You need to stimulate the pituitary, and after the stimulation, you will collect the sample after 30, 60, 90 or 120 minutes. So how we can stimulate the pituitary? Maybe physiological stimulus or pharmacological. Physiological, usually fasting, sleep and exercise. So fasting we take as a routine stimulus. So always GH has to be done in number one in the fasting state. And apart from that, we will be stimulating the pituitary by some pharmacological agents, maybe levodopa, clonidine, glucagon, propanol, arginine, and insulin. These are the six. Insulin tolerance test is the gold standard, but I'm afraid I don't know if anyone is doing it. Reason being, it's pretty risky. It creates hypoglycemia, and we all know that growth hormone is a counter-regulatory hormone for hypoglycemia. So that is why the growth hormone is being secreted. So insulin is quite risky. That is why most of we people are not using insulin. The two most commonly used pharmacological agent is clonidine and glucagon. After giving patient to these two drugs, one of them, we take blood sample after 30, 60, 90 and 120 minutes. However, patients needs to be euthyroid at the time of GH testing, otherwise GH will come falsely low. So before going for GH testing, patient must be evaluated for thyroid status. They should be performed overnight fast for prepubertal children, means which is just maybe 11 or 12 years and have not yet entered the puberty, pre-treating with sex hormones, increasing the specificity of the test. And what is the value? Less than that, we call it growth hormone deficiency. It is 10 nanogram per ml. Some people may say 7, but now because many standard textbook and new guidelines, they say less than 10 is the growth hormone deficiency state, and units again has to be seen that it is 10 nanogram per ml. So let us, with this background, apart from GH, whenever we evaluate this short stature case, we do, apart from that, IGF-1 and IGF-BP3 also. We all know that GH action is mediated by the production of IGF-1. So if IGF-1 is low, so obviously GH will not be giving the its action. And apart from that, the severe GHD is associated with the reduction in IGF-1 level. IGF-1 again circulate bound to the IGF-BP3. So having status of both these IGF-1 and IGF-BP3 may be an adjuvant to the provocative testing. If both these tests are low and patient is having the typical feature of short stature, no other diagnosis, then may be having the GH deficiency. However, IGF-1 and IGF-BP3, both of them, they are highly, number one, method dependent. Number two, they are affected by the age, sex, and pubertal status. And dictum is that one should have a racial graph for these. However, in India, we don't have such graph for IGF-1 and IGF-BP3. Whatever we are following is the West level, and they have to be less than 2 SD than the normal or whatever has been given by the lab values, then we say it is the less. So with this background, GH, IGF-1 and IGF-BP3, let us discuss a couple of case scenarios. This is case one. This is the mother. This is the daughter. Seems to be, short in height. Let us see how is her age. So it's a 4-year-old girl. Height is 83 centimeter, which is minus 3 SD. Weight is 12 kg, which is minus 2.2 SD. There is no significant past or perinatal history. Birth weight is 2.5 kg. All systemic workup normal. When I say all systemic workup normal, means CBC, LFT, KFT, thyroid profile, TTG, everything is normal. And it is typically short, and it is severe short stature. As we all know, that height, if less than more than minus 2 SD, it's a short stature. Here it is minus 3 ST. So what next we should be doing? Bone age, very, very important. Now bone age is 18 months. So a girl who is 4-year-old and bone age is 18 months, it means severely retarded bone age. Something going wrong, specifically endocrine, some endocrine problem. Because if bone age is more than 2 years of difference of bone age, is a significant difference. So what is the next test should be done? Because we have done all the tests. So IGF-1 and IGF-BP3 has been advised in this case, and both of them are very, very low. But however, as we have to see the TST low, so sometimes it becomes difficult, and these the levels, normal levels is given by the lab only. So based on this, so the treating doctor decide that he should do stimulation test. So we have 6 pharmacological agents. Out of that, he chooses to clonidine. So after stimulating with the clonidine, if you see at 0 minutes, it's just 0.08, but 30, 60 and 120 minutes, it is 0.2 and 0.5, means far less than the 10 nanogram per ml, which is the normal level. So it is a case of severe growth hormone deficiency. MRI brain has been done and it has been found to the hypoplastic anterior pituitary. Then couple of other tests, cortisol is also being advised just to see that they are okay or fine. So cortisol was also found to be low in this case. So it was having 2 hormone deficiency, GH and cortisol, which has been treated accordingly. Now coming to the case number 2. It's an 8-year-old male which is having the breech delivery. Now breech delivery is we should be very careful when someone is having breech delivery, because there are instances during the delivery with the breech process, patient may have some pituitary injury. Height at the age of 8 years is 100 centimeter, which is less than 3rd centile. Weight is 15 kg, again less than 3rd centile. Means patient is typically of short stature. There is no significant past or perinatal history. Birth weight was 2.5 kg. All systemic workup normal, means CBC, LFT, KFT, thyroid profile and TTG were normal. Bone age was 4 years. If you see the difference of chronological age and bone age is very, very high. 8 years at the chronological age of 8 years, the bone age is just 4 years. On doing the free T4, it was found to be 0.45 nanogram per deciliter, which is very, very low, and TSS was 2.3, normal. So thyroxine replacement was started. However, even after thyroxine replacement at adequate dose and patient is taking adequately and rigorously, the increment in height was just 0.4 centimeter in 6 months. So what next? Why it is happening? Because it seems to be a case of short stature because of thyroid deficiency. So when thyroid hormone has been replaced, ideally patient should grow. Can we make some interactive? Can anyone say something? Anyone? Well, what next? Because otherwise, so patient should gain height. Why patient is not gaining height? Anyone? Clue is there in this slide only. Can anyone suggest anything? Yes.
Central hypothyroid.
Yes, very good. If you look at this, that free T4 is low, but TS is not increased. Then it's a case of central hypothyroidism, and it's a case of breech delivery. So central hypothyroidism, breech delivery means some other hormone is also deficient. It's not only the thyroid. Had it been the central hypothyroidism only, so obviously patient would have gained the height. However, patient is not gaining height because apart from thyroid hormone, probably some other hormone is also deficient. So IGF-1 and IGVP3 was done in this case, which is just borderline, not giving much clue. Then stimulation test was done, thinking of GH deficiency because thyroid hormone has been replaced. This time the stimulation was done by glucagon And what has been seen that at 30 minutes, 60 or 120 minutes, GH is hardly 2.8. Again, if you look at the units, this is nanogram per ml. As we all know, we have just discussed less than 10, something less than 10 is deficient. So hence this case is of GH deficiency. That is why patient was not gaining height. However, random stimulation should not be done. The message is that you always stimulate the pituitary. Only after stimulating the pituitary, you will be knowing the exact status of the patient. On MRI, again, hypoplastic pituitary gland was there because of the breech delivery. There was most probably pituitary injury. That is why patient presented with hypothyroidism and hypo-GH deficiency. Now coming to the thyroid hormones, which are most commonly advised, and we see most of the cases routinely in our OPD. If you look at the range of the thyroid hormone, this is what you are getting when you are advising the thyroid hormone, and the lab people, they give this much of reference. TSH 0.4 to 4.2, free T4 0.7 to 2.5, free T3 0.2 to 0.5. And this is just for illustration purpose. If you look at that, we have to see the unit also, milli unit per liter. This is nanogram per deciliter. This is nanogram per deciliter. However, as we all know, in pediatric age group, everything is different. So these values are not absolute, because pediatric values are age related, and any value of free T4 which is less than 1.1 nanogram per deciliter, especially in neonatal age, this is says to be abnormal, and we have to treat that patient. Reason being, we know that brain growth, which is very important part of the life, is very crucial in first 3 years of age, and we don't want that our patient should have any sort of low IQ because of the thyroid hormones. So how this thyroid hormones has to be evaluated? Again, the chemiluminescent assay is the choice which of the assay which should be routinely used. Many a times we are getting reports which is done by the ELISA method. So it should not be by the ELISA method, it should be by the chemiluminescent method, because ELISA method values may differ. TSH and T4 estimation usually tells us about the hypothyroidism, and T3 requires for hyperthyroidism. T3 doesn't have much role in hypothyroidism, because T3 is produced by the conversion of T4 from T4 in peripheral tissues. So it is for the hyperthyroidism which is having much importance. And for congenital hyperthyroidism, we all know either we have to do TSH or free T4 in after 2 to 3 days, or in cold blood, just to diagnose the congenital hypothyroidism. This is the reference genes in neonatal period. You can have it from the ISFI website, or you can take the screenshot. And if you see the value of free T3, free T4 here, it is somewhere more than 1, always more than 1, 1.5, 1.3, either it is first day, third day, seventh day. So message is that if it is less than 1.1, we have to be very careful. TSH may not be increased, as we have just seen in central hypothyroidism, rather free T4 will be low. Choice is yours. What is has to be done for the universal screening, TSH or free T4? Usually TSH is a preferred method. Same in post-neonatal, again 1 to 3, 3 to 12. If you look at the free T4 value, it is somewhere more than 1, 1 to 3.4, 1 to 2.4. And if you just want to remember one unit, then probably after 2 weeks of age, somewhere 1 to 2.1 to 2 nanogram per deciliter is the normal value for thyroid hormone. If you look at the neonatal thyroid parameters, usually cord blood is having 10 to 20. If it is more than 20, then it is abnormal and needs to recall that patient for further testing. Immediately when baby come out of mother's body, because of the change in the temperature, there is a rapid surge in the TSH, which may go up to 50 to 100, which peaks by day 1. After 1 to 2 days, they start declining, and after 3 days, they returns to normal, which is 9.1, never more than 10. That is why we advise, or it is advised, to go for newborn screening after 48 hours of the day. If you look at the T4 or free T4, then obviously because this TSH will produce more T4, so there is twofold increase, which peaks state 2, remains high for a couple of weeks, then comes to normal. This is the neonatal screening card. When you are doing the neonatal screening, these are the three circles. You have to put blood in 3 circles, and you have to very careful, don't put more than 1 drop of blood. There has to be just 1 drop of blood, and it has to cover the whole circle. Mind you, if you are putting it 2 drop of blood, it will make the hormones double. And many diseases may be estimated with just this card. This is what we were using at our hospital, Hindura Hospital, and out of this card we were just diagnosing CH or phenylketonuria, thyroid, galactosemia, beta-nidase, and G6PD. This we have done for last 2 years, and we screened approximately 14,000 children, babies. Apart from T4 TSH, what we are estimating just to see the thyroid illness is thyroglobulin antibody and TPO antibodies, thyroid peroxidase. However, we have to be very careful that these antibodies are the result of the injury to the thyroid rather than the causative causing injury to the thyroid. Many times we thought that if TPO antibody is positive, then probably it will cause some injury to the thyroid. No, on the contrary, injury has already been occurred. This is just the result of the injury. However, these antibodies, they may contribute to its development and chronicity of that injury which has already been occurred to the thyroid. They are usually present in autoimmune thyroiditis and Graves, but we have to be very careful that it may present in 20 to 27% of the normal population. So merely presence of TPO antibody does not say that patient is having hypothyroidism. Many times we are having a report where TPO antibody is positive, TSH is slightly raised, and we think that probably this is a case of hypothyroidism. No, because this TPO antibody may be present normally, and the just slight elevation of that TSH may be something else. Now, with this background, let us discuss a case. It's a full-term male baby which is having a birth weight of 2.9 kg with cord blood is 65 micro international unit per ml, and the repeat blood test was done on day 6, and it is saying free T4 which is 0.6 nanogram, normal is they have given 0.92, 0.2, total T4 is 3, which is normal is 6.5 to 16.3, and TSH is 40 milli, which is definitely higher. So what is the interpretation? What is this case? Is this case suffering for hypothyroidism? I will be happy if someone is coming forward and interacting actively. Yes.
This is hypothyroidism.
This is hypothyroidism. Is it central hypothyroidism or primary hypothyroidism? Can we differentiate with this? This is primary.
This is not TSH.
TSH is
This
high.
is normal, sir.
TSH is
High.
very, very high. 40 is very, at a day of 6, we have just, in previous slide, we have just said that by the first week, it came down to 9.1. It is 40, which is very, very high. So TSH is increased, free T4 is low. It's a case of primary congenital hypothyroidism, not a central hypothyroidism, and should be treated with the thyroid replacement. Now coming to the case 2, it's a 3-week-old female home delivery with prolonged jaundice. They come with the prolonged jaundice and lethargy. Thyroid profile was ordered. TSH was 11 milli international unit. Free T4 is low, very low, 0.4. Diagnosis of congenital hypothyroidism was made. Started on levothyroxine by 15 microgram. After few days, patient was having some fever and presented with shock. Why?
Sir, it could be associated with pituitary deficiency.
Yes, very good. It may
Growth
not be
hormone.
growth hormone don't usually present with the shock.
Cortisol.
Usually growth hormone. Yes, maybe some cortisol. Very good. May I know your name, doctor?
Gopi Krishna, sir.
Wow, Dr. Gopi Krishna. You deserve a prize. Unfortunately, I don't have, because digitally I can give you. Yes, it is multiple pituitary hormone deficiency. If you look at the just borderline elevated TSH, we say up to 10 is normal. It is just 11, but free T4 is very, very low. When free T4 is very, very low, we have to be think that in mind. Probably we may not be dealing with something else. So it was central hypothyroidism because of the mildly elevated TSH and very low free T4. So we have to be very careful. Although it's not a very common scenario, it's very rare. We don't encounter it frequently, but yes, we have to keep this thing in mind. When TSH is just mildly elevated and free T4 is very, very low. So it was Addisonian crisis. Patient was having cortisol deficiency also. Now case 3, it's a very typical we are getting in our clinics or OPDs. It's a 10-year-old old girl with obesity. Height is 130 centimeter, which is just 10 to 25th centile. Weight is 50 kg, which is more than 90th centile. BMI is 29.6. So it means we are dealing with an obese patient. Serum TSH was advised because someone thought it may be because of the hypothyroidism. So serum TSH came with 8.8 milli international unit. However, free T4 is 1.9, which is normal. TPO antibody has been advised and TPO antibody is positive. So what is this case?
Autoimmune hypothyroid.
Autoimmune hypothyroidism. Anything else? Anyone?
Normal obesity. The antibodies are very positive in normal population also.
Yes,
With
antibody. Yes, and we should very good. We should not be guided by just presence of TPO antibodies, as we have just seen. 20 to 27% of normal population may have TPO antibody positive. If you look at the TCH is just mildly elevated. Any TSH which is more than 10 is significant. Less than 10, somewhere between 5 to 10, we take it just as subclinical. And because patient is severely obese, if you look at the height and the weight, then it is severely obese. Then most probably it is obesity-induced thyrotropinemia rather than the hypothyroidism which is causing the obesity. However, we would keep this patient under our follow-up. We will give the treatment for the obesity, diet and exercise. And when patient will have a reduced BMI, we'll again evaluate thyroid profile. Most probably this will go down. This will just come to normal because it is most probably because of the obesity. It's actually a response of the body to increase the basal metabolic rate to shed off the obesity, and that is why the TSH is slightly going high. Now, after thyroid and growth hormone, let us come third very commonly advised 17-OHP nowadays, because we are doing the newborn screening. Number one, it should be done the morning sample. However, fasting state is not required. The most common method for 17-OHP is fluoroimmunoassay. Although we have just seen that most common is the chemiluminescent and LCMS, but for screening purpose, the most common method advised is fluoroimmunoassay. However, confirmation has to be done by LSMS or MS. This is the tandem mass spectroscopy. If the random labels is more than 100 or 1000 nanogram, then there is no confusion. Most probably, it's a classical case of CH. Problem comes when it is less than 100 but more than 10, because less than 10 is supposed to be normal. So if it is somewhere in between, then we have to stimulate. We have to done the ACH stimulated levels, and if borderline cases or non-classical cases, means borderline means when these 17 OHP level is less than that. We should avoid in first 48 hours, because falsely levels may be erroneous, may be low because of the antenatal corticosteroids giving to the mother, or in preterm babies, or maybe sick babies. And in such cases, recall and retest after 2 weeks in these above cases when you are suspecting 17 OHP deficiency. This is the article we have published. It's a review article we published in Indian Pediatrics in January and February. All of you can go through these two articles. One is diagnosis, another is management, where we have discussed elaborately how to diagnose and how to treat. And if you look at this chart, then most probably, if you are dealing with the term babies and weight is more than 2.5, then 37.5 is the unit where More than that, maybe 17 OHP, maybe patient CH and needs further evaluation. However, this 37.5 is the nanomole per liter. While we were just discussing 100 and 1000, that was nanogram per ml. So we have to change the unit. So unit has to be seen very carefully. Now this is the case one. This is a 3-month-old boy brought to notice during immunization visit. Apparently healthy, thriving well baby. There is no significant past history, breastfeeding well. Mother saying absolutely no problem. Have you seen his genitalia? Can anyone comment on that?
Fused.
And it is why they were saying it is why, you know, because this clitoris, which is going
Clitoris is larger.
and large. Can anyone tell me the what when we say clitomegaly? When what is the size of the clitoris when it goes more than that?
1 centimeter.
1 centimeter. When it is more than 1 centimeter, and the parents they falsely take it as a phallus. They think that probably it's a phallus. If you see that these both the scrotal sacs are empty, there is no testicles in that. Serum electrolyte was done. Sodium was 142, potassium was 5.2, again normal. Random blood glucose was done 92, cortisol 4.2. However, 17 OHP, when it was done, it was 520, absolutely more than 100. Karyotyping done, what is the 46XS rather than the 46XY. On ultrasound, small uterus, testes obviously not located. Small uterus because in that age group it is difficult to assess the uterus side. So take home message is that we should always pay attention to the genitalia of the patient at the time of delivery. We should not wrongly label any patient with a sex, either male or female. She's lucky that not landed in the crisis. Otherwise, she may landed with the shock and dehydration. So what is the diagnosis? Yes, what is the diagnosis? Simple virilizing CH. Why the patient is not landed in shock? Because it is simple virilizing. It was not the salt losing variety. Simple virilizing 46X DST. Now after this, let us how to estimate cortisol and ACTH. These are another two hormones which are usually advised. So if we look at the hormone level, what is the normal hormone level of the cortisol? In newborn, usually 5 microgram, in infants 9. However, in newborn and infants, we usually don't advise cortisol until unless it's a case of hypoglycemia. 1 to 2 years, 4 to 20. After 2 years, there is a circadian rhythm is established. Till infants, usually circadian rhythm is not established, what has been seen in the adults. So after 2 years, 8 a.m., it is somewhere 10 to 20. And if it is 4 p.m., it is 5 to 10 microgram per deciliter. So if someone is having 8 a.m. cortisol more than 20, then probably it's a cortisol excess. Or if the cortisol is less than 3, as has been written, then probably it's a cortisol deficiency. If it is 4 p.m. cortisol, then it is half of the what has been seen in the morning. This is 5 to 10. If you look at the ACTH, usually 8 a.m. ACTH is usually more than 50, rarely more than 50, sorry. If it is more than 50, probably it is higher. At 4 p.m., it is not detectable. So serum cortisol should be done at 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Apart from serum, we can do the salivary cortisol, urinary steroids. Method is again tandem mass spectroscopy. For ACTH measurements, we have already discussed. It should be done in the morning, number one, and to be very, very important because it is a heat labile. So immediately collection and transport on ice and in plastic tube. It should never be sent in the glass tube because it adheres to the glass tube and levels will be falsely low. So 3 things for ACTH: in the morning time, fasting not required, transport on ice, ACTH and PTH, both of them, and in plastic tube, not in glass tube. For steroid axis, suppose someone is having excess of cortisol, then we just try to suppress these level by doing the dexamethasone suppression test. Either we can give the overnight dexamethasone or low dose. After giving these dexamethasone, usually levels of cortisol will be suppressed because of feedback mechanism. However, if level are not suppressed, then probably maybe some endogenous cause for this cortisol axis and patients needs further workup. This 1.8 microgram per deciliter. If it is less than 1.8 microgram per deciliter, it excludes Cushing's syndrome. However, if it is more than that, although it does not include Cushing's, but it needs further workup. Apart from this test, we can do the 24-hour urinary free cortisol, but obviously it's a tedious job in pediatric patients, and sensitivity for Cushing. So for this 24 urinary free cortisol is somewhere 45 to 70%. Random ACTH value should not be done as low values possible. Now, with this background, let us discuss a case. Now, it's a 12-year-old boy presented with complaint of not growing for past 1 year, and they are saying it is just 1.4 centimeter in last 1 year, which is very, very less. We all know if someone is growing less than 4 centimeter per year, then it amounts to the short stature. However, weight gaining is adequately. There is history of insomnia, loss of appetite, and regressive behavior. On examination of pubertal status, testicular volume is 8 ml. It means puberty has been attained, because if any TB, any testicular volume more than 4 ml, it means puberty is attained. On examination, height was 140 centimeter, which is somewhat 10 to 25th centile, and weight is 52 kg, which is 75th to 90th centile. BMI was 26.5. And on examination, BP was found to be higher, 150 by 102. So if you look at this case, then there are three things important: that patient is not, growth velocity is low. His growth velocity is definitely less than 25th centile, which comes as a case of short stature. Otherwise, height is falling in 10 to 25th centile, but because of the growth velocity, he is falling into the definition of short stature. However, weight is not affected that much, and BP is higher. What can be the possibility? Because on investigation, CBC, LFT, KFT, thyroid profile, even TTG, everything is normal. What can be the other possibility why the patient is having the BP high? What is the next test we will advise?
Cortisol.
Yes, cortisol, but before that, let us see the electrolyte status. If you look, sodium is okay, but potassium is very, very low, 2.4. So these two things, low potassium, blood pressure high, something adrenal cause, because cortisol axis again always causes the hypokalemia. So cortisol 8 am was 49.4. We all know that 10 to 20 is the normal. So it is definitely more than that, and 10 p.m. is the 26.4. And if we look at that 4 p.m. or 4 to 10 p.m., we have seen that 5 to 10. Many times we may not have that much of higher level of the cortisol. We may have the reversal of the rhythm. Reversal of the rhythm means at AM cortisol is just 10 to 20, but the 4 p.m. or 6 p.m. cortisol, which should be just 5 to 10, that has gone to the 20. This reversal of rhythm again says that some cortisol problem is there, some cortisol excess is there. ACTH was 72.8 picogram per ml. Again, dexamethasone suppression test was done, which is not suppressible. Ideally, the ACTH should be low, because when cortisol is that much of high, why we are having ACTH? ACTH should be low, but it means something gone, some endocrine problem is there. So on doing dexamethasone suppression test, it was not suppressing, means some endogenous production of cortisol. On MRI, there was a pituitary adenoma. It was the ACTH secreting adenoma, which was secreting ACTH, and because of the ACTH, cortisol was high. There was no feedback mechanism. Appropriate management has been done for that case. Now, case 2. This is the baby. Yes. What is the diagnosis? Yes. Anyone? Look at this baby. His hand, leg, his face, chubby cheeks.
Cushing
Cushing.
Some because we are discussing cortisol, but definitely this is having some Cushingoid features. This is it.
Lawrence-Beadle
No,
syndrome.
Lawrence-Beadle doesn't present like this. This is a 3-month-old baby brought with complaint of weight gain for past 1 month. History
Some
of
private
intake,
practitioner giving steroid drops.
Because of
yes.
steroids.
History of intake of some medication drops for remitted episode of cough.
Omnicortil drops.
Yes, birth weight was
Induced.
very good. Birth weight was 6.6 kg. Or, sorry, examination weight was 6.6. Although I was not having the birth weight, but 6.6 at the age of 3 months is definitely high. Serum cortisol, midnight 0.4, morning 0.3 microgram per deciliter. Definitely suppressed. So what it is? Suppressed. So this is exogenous, because when we are giving cortisol from outside, so obviously this will suppress the estimation, and this is, I mean, maybe most probably because of the exogenous. Had been endogenous, these features, because of the endogenous, this would have been the very high. In this case, these drops, when we see, it was the actually betnazole drops which was given to this baby, and because of the betnazole drops, all things was happening. Patient's own cortisol production came to the standstill because it was being provided from the outside. Feedback mechanism was absolutely okay, fine. Now coming to the vitamin D. Just briefly, vitamin D and PTH. Vitamin D is again a very commonly advised test. Preferred method is
Sorry to interrupt you. Just one question. When we are giving exogenous steroids, that doesn't reflect on the serum values which we measure?
Sometimes maybe or sometimes may not. Suppose had it been cortisol high, then probably we would be thinking either it is endogenous or it is exogenous. Then we would have done the dexamethasone suppression test just to see that it is suppressible or not suppressible. Here it is already suppressible. As we have just said, if we look at the here, when we are doing dexamethasone, then value of these cortisol, they are suppressed. If it is less than 1.8 microgram per deciliter, they excludes the Cushing syndrome. They exclude the Cushing syndrome. So here the same was being reflected here.
Okay, thanks.
It may be high. Had it been higher, we would have gone for the dexamethasone suppression test. Suppression. Here it has already been suppressed. Nice question. Now, coming to the vitamin D and PTH, it has to be done again by the chemiluminescent assay. The normal values has been defined in various way. However, the latest protocol is that less than 12 is deficiency. Somewhere 12 to 20 is inefficiency. More than 20 is supposed to be the sufficient, and more than 100 is hypervitaminosis. So we have to be very careful about more than 100 and less than 12. And you have to be very careful about this unit also, because many times they comes in picomole, then we have to again convert the value, because this is easy to remember. And for conversion, as we all know, endmemo.com is the one site from where you can do. And if it is the toxicity, obviously there will be hypercalcemia, hypercalciuria, and PTH will be suppressed. And normal range of PTH is 10 to 65 picogram per ml. And again, it's a heat labile, should be transported immediately and on ice. This because many times we have seen patient coming with the hypocalcemia and PTH level is low because they have difficulty in transportation and processing. Because of that, the falsely low PTH. Now coming to this case. This is a 1.5-year-old mole child with rickets and deformities, received injection vitamin D 6 lakhs unit as commonly been given. Subsequently, someone prescribed again 60,000 weekly for 6 weeks. They come with the polyuria and lethargy. On examination, patient was severely dehydrated. Calcium was very high, 11.6. Phosphorus was okay, 4.3, and ALP was raised. 25 hydroxy level was 158 nanogram. As we all know, toxic level is 100 more than 100. So they were absolutely in toxic range. That is why patient was having polyuria, and because of that patient was having dehydration, and so the lethargy. Urine calcium creatinine ratio was 0.28. If we look at the normal level, it is less than 0.14. Any level which is more than 0.2, it seems that there is the hypercalciuria. Serum PTH was very suppressed, just 6 picogram. Corrected calcium, because we have to see the albumin ratio also. That is why whenever we have high calcium level, so we want to be just doubly sure that it is not because of the some hypoalbuminemia.
Excuse
So
me,
with
sir.
this,
I request
Ji.
you to wind up in next 10 to 15 minutes because it's already 55. So
This is last. This is last.
no issue. We
This
can
is
take
last.
10 to 15 minutes. No issues.
Okay. Thank you. So this was the last. So take home message was that So take home message was that when we are prescribing vitamin D, please be careful that someone else has not given that vitamin D. And nowadays, this 6 lakhs unit is absolutely out of the question. What is the maximum vitamin D we can give is just 3 lakhs. Indian Academy of Pediatrics has recently published its guideline. So with these brief couple of hormonal methods and cases, we have just discussed all these hormones. If anyone is having any query, although it's just a repetition because in last 2 days we have read and listened to all these things. If anyone is having any query among all these hormones, then one can discuss. Apart from that, for puberty also, as I have said, the gonadotropins, LH and FSH, they also has to be seen with the stimulation, pituitary stimulation, rather than the random values, because they are again in the pulsatile fashion.
Yes, sir.
G.
Yes, sir. Most of the times nowadays we are not seeing typical rickets cases.
Yeah.
They are presenting with insufficiency. That means they present
just
with vitamin D levels.
yes,
Yes, sir.
biochemical rickets. You want to say this is just biochemical rickets.
Yes, sir.
Ideally, biochemical rickets should also be treated. We should not wait for this frank disease to happen. As I'm working in a government hospital, I see lots of cases of rickets. We see lots of, I mean, you can see with the deformity, with the absolutely cupping and fraying of the epiphysis. So we should not wait for the disease to occur. If it is insufficiency, we should treat it. However, doses we have to see very carefully. There is no role nowadays for injection. Oral is as good as or injectable. If baby is less than 3 months, we should give just 2000 unit daily for 3 months. 3 months to 1 year, somewhere we can give 50,000 unit. That is okay, fine. And 1 to 12 years, it is somewhere 1.5 lakhs to 3 lakhs. Whatever you wish to give, that's okay, fine. There are 2 guidelines for vitamin D supplementation. One given by Indian Academy of Pediatrics, published. It is freely available. Apart from that, there is a Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism, JCM. You can look for that. In both the journals, they have, in detail described. However, this is the brief, just less than 3 months, no dose therapy, 2000 unit per day for 3 months. 3 months to 1 year, 50,000 is okay, fine. 1 to 12 years, 1.5 to 3 lakhs, but absolutely not 6 lakhs and not repeated doses.
Thank you, sir.
Any other query or question? Else we will wind up because it's already 2. We are approaching to 2 p.m. and from 2:30 we have again sessions. Dr. Dinesh, Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Yeah.
Some of the on newborn screening TSH, we most of the times, if it falls into the deficiency range or if it is in the normal range, that is okay. So as you said, the TSH, if it is more than 10, then it's okay. But if it is around, if it is TSH falls between 5 to 10 for the on the day 2 to day 5, so whether we have to wait for a repeat test or what to do, sir, exactly?
I would request you, we have a whole session of 30 minutes on newborn screening, just 2:30 to 3 p.m. And my
Okay,
own
sir.
colleague, Dr. Vijay Jaiswal, will be dealing. So I think we'll better discuss over there. Yes,
Okay,
something has to be done in that scenario, but I have purposely left all these things for his lecture. Dr. Dinesh, if there's no query, we can wind up the session.
Actually, I have to see the other rooms also. So I'm not winding it up. If the people want to ask something, they are most welcome to interact. Otherwise, they can leave.
I have one question. If vitamin D is low, but PTH is also low, what to do about that?
Vitamin D is low.
And PTH is also low.
PTH is also low. It means we may be dealing with the hypoparathyroidism, because hypoparathyroidism, in case of when vitamin D is low, PTH should go high as a counter regulatory response. Then probably we are dealing with the same hypopara. Then you have to look for the level of the phosphorus. Apart from the low calcium, patient may have the high phosphorus in that case. And when you are, again, the very important, when we are saying low PTH, it has to be, as it is a heat lobile, should be transported on ice. Many a times what we have seen, low vitamin D and low PTH, because PTH has been processed and transported in a not a incorrect way, and that is why falsely PTH has been come low. Because with the rising of the temperature, it dissociates and disintegrates very rapidly. Any other question till, I mean, if you want any other slides, I can go for that, for thyroid or any other slides.
In case of, you told me the ambiguous Zetalia, which is a non-virile CAH, this could have been a urogenital sinus also. Shouldn't we have done a sinogram over there before labeling that it is a clitoris or it is a penis?
Sorry, in this case you are saying, for this case,
Yes, yes.
uh,
As
uh,
the class is, we never know where is the